Well, let's not bury the lead on this one, shall we? I don't like Halo 4. I've never liked Halo 4. That's not an overly controversial opinion. Every game in the 343 era of Halo is divisive in its own way. I go back and forth on whether it's right to call Halo 4 a bad game. I don't think that's true, but I do think it's a game that doesn't know what it wants to be. The game is both a soft remake of Halo 1 while trying to blend the gameplay and trends of modern FPS games. It's both extremely loyal to the established lore of the series and obviously contradictory to it. I think that Halo 4's issues are pretty understandable. It wasn't just 343's first Halo game, it was the first game that any of them had made together as a team, and a sequel to one of the most famous trilogies in game history is a hell of a first project. I understand perfectly why Halo 4 came out the way it did, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. Okay, so here's the situation. Halo 3 was supposed to be the end of Halo. Well, really, Halo 2 was supposed to be the end of Halo, but let's not get into that right now. Bungie had intended to just make the trilogy and leave it at that. Unfortunately, Bungie don't own Halo, Microsoft own Halo, and Microsoft wanted more Halo games. So for the next few years we got a series of prequels as Bungie bought their freedom from Microsoft. But Microsoft still wanted more Halo games. So Microsoft put together a new studio, 343 Industries, with the sole purpose of making more Halo games. Only a single member of the core Bungie staff actually joined this new team. The rest were entirely new to the franchise and to each other. That is a challenge I would not wish upon anybody. An entirely new team taking on the mantle from one of the most beloved game companies in the industry on one of the most beloved franchises in the industry. I mean, what the hell were they supposed to do? Halo 4 is caught in this identity crisis where it wants to be a clear and faithful sequel to the Halo games that came before, while establishing 343's own identity as a studio. The problem is, it's their first game, and they hadn't quite figured out what that identity was yet. Arguably they still haven't, but that's a topic of discussion for future videos. Given this situation, my impulse is to forgive a lot of the stuff I don't like about Halo 4. But just because I understand why it happened doesn't mean I don't still think it's bad. And frankly, sometimes tearing stuff down is more fun. And hey, this is YouTube after all.
Tell me about the children.
When I say that Halo 3 left no branches for a sequel to grasp at, I do mean that literally. Let's look at where things stand at the end of Halo 3. The Covenant is defeated, the Elites are now allies of humanity, the Flood have been defeated. All avenues of conflict have essentially been solved by the end of Halo 3. The galaxy is at peace. The legendary ending of Halo 3 does show Master Chief and Cortana drifting towards a big ominous orb, so that's something. But the most basic fundamental questions of the game, like what are you doing and who are you shooting, all had to be rebuilt completely from the ground up. To solve both of these questions, Halo 4 turns to the deep lore, pulling its main villain from the terminals of Halo 3, and its main character conflict from an established rule in the novels. Being the start of a new trilogy, it would have been more than fair for Halo 4 to start a new protagonist and a new cast of characters. Halo Reach already proved that you can sell a Halo game without the Chief, but instead 343 clearly decided that it's a Halo game and the people are going to want Master Chief. It seems weird to say, given that he's the protagonist of the first 3 games, but the Chief is given a much larger role in this game than any of the trilogy games. I don't know this for sure, but I feel fairly confident that he has more voice lines in this game than in Halo 1, 2 and 3 combined. This is because he talks now, not just during cutscenes, but all the time. More than the rest of the series, even the games after this one, Halo 4 is about the Master Chief, who he is as a person, his relationships and his humanity, and that is certainly a choice for the big green man who shoots the aliens, but we'll get into it later.
Wake up, Chief. I need you.
4 years after the events of Halo 3, the Forward Unto Dawn, or the half of it that Chief and Cortana were stranded on at the end of Halo 3, has somehow found its way into the orbit of a Forerunner shield world, a giant hollow planet called Requiem. This establishes one of the first and most glaring issues with the story, the fact that it's only been 4 years. The further we get into the story, the idea that this is all taking place a mere 4 years after Halo 3 will start to become completely absurd, both for the changes that have happened in such a short amount of time and the character dynamics suggested by the game. But the reason this happened is because of Halo 4's commitment not to break established lore. The big concept driving the plot of Halo 4 is a concept from the lore called AI rampancy. Basically, after 7 years of service, AI start to deteriorate and go insane and have to be shut down. Why 7 years? Well, it's complicated. This hard 7-year limit is why we're only jumping ahead 4 years, where Cortana has begun this rampancy phase but has not yet completely deteriorated. I think a commitment to obeying rules like that is a noble concept. Movies and shows often contradict things established in books and other mediums because I suppose they consider those mediums to be less important and less likely to have been read. Video games usually do a better job of keeping everything together, in large part because the stories of games are considered to matter less. And that means developers are generally more okay with letting things go unexplained in-game because there is a book somewhere that explains it. I think sticking to this particular rule, though, was a little silly, considering how the passage of time is presented in the story. Master Chief is supposed to feel like a Captain America, man-out-of-time figure, an old soldier who doesn't understand this modern world. But the fact that it's only been 4 years since the end of Halo 3 makes that concept completely comical. And besides, if you're watching the video, you can clearly see that they were willing to make a much bigger, much more obvious contradiction in that Master Chief looks completely different from the last time we saw him. In fairness, everything looks completely different from the last time we saw it. The Forward Unto Dawn appears to be an entirely different, much bigger ship. Cortana looks completely different. All of the guns and enemies look completely different. It's not just increased fidelity from Halo 3. 343 decided to completely change the art style and look of the entire game, and I don't like it. I'll go as far as to say that Halo 4 is the worst looking game in the entire series because its visual design is such an absolute mess. Everything looks incredibly over-designed with shapes and bumps and ridges everywhere. Chief's armour has gone from a sleek futuristic look to this weird, bulky mess of a design. I find it hard to pin down what they were even going for. I wouldn't call it more realistic than the previous games. If anything, the game looks less realistic than Halo 3. And it's not going for the grungy, Modern Warfare-esque graphics of Halo Reach either. It's just making big swings. And I realise how subjective this is, but I just do not care for it. And in terms of Spartans, the multiplayer customization feels this even worse than the campaign. Halo 4 was developed at the tail end of the 360 generation, and being so deep into that generation, they have figured out how to push graphical fidelity to its maximum for that hardware. But the Halo 4 version of doing that is just to absolutely drown the game in post-processing effects. There's even more lens flares in this game than every J.J. Abrams movie combined. It gives the game this very strange, glossy look that I just do not find appealing, especially since the game combines all of these post-processing effects with a much more muted colour palette, leading to a lot of areas, especially in the dark, that just look like soup. The game leans heavily into immersive UI elements, which means for the entire game you have these black parts on your screen where your view is supposed to be being blocked by the Chief's helmet, which is nice in theory, but in practice I just find it and all of these pointless holographic lines and stuff incredibly distracting. If I was a real soldier and I had all this crap in my eyes, I think I'd just start fighting without my helmet on, quite frankly. The music has a very different feeling to the trilogy, and the loss of Marty O'Donnell is felt across the game. I won't go as far as to say it's bad, and there are a few memorable moments, but the music never carries a scene like it does in previous Halo games. The biggest visual loss to me is the Forerunners. Since pretty much the entire game is set on a Forerunner planet, you spend a lot of time in Forerunner structures. But the design of these areas is completely different to previous games, way less sleek, with a lot of weird, pointless angles, rim lights everywhere, and every single edge is filleted like they were trying to child-proof the area. It's honestly distractingly over-designed to walk through. I think this drastic redesign was a part of 343 trying to establish their own identity over the franchise, and the redesign wouldn't even bug me that much if it wasn't so obviously inferior to the previous games. A few years after this, they did the visuals for Halo 2 Anniversary, so they can make a game that looks good and in keeping with the more traditional Halo art style. This was a choice, and it's a choice that I think was misguided. It's especially weird since, experientially, Halo 4 is a soft remake of Halo Combat Evolved. It's the Chief and Cortana stranded on a strange alien world trying to stop the bad guys from activating a superweapon. The mix of being so weirdly faithful to the Halo of old while at the same time looking like an entirely different game is very, very weird. If you follow the basic mission structure of the game, there is a lot of overlap with Halo 1. The first mission is defending the ship from Covenant invaders after being awoken from cryosleep, lots of cramped hallways and the like. The second mission, involving you crashing onto a strange alien world, opens up into a grassy hilly area that you explore with a warthog. The third mission is set in a darker nighttime, infiltrating the heart of enemy territory. This also serves as our 343 Guilty Spark, introducing a surprise second faction of enemies into the game. The fourth mission is a bit of a stretch, I'll grant you, but both missions involve looking for something, the Cartographer in Halo 1 and Survivors in Halo 4. But then the fifth mission is a vehicle-focused assault on a wide fortified area. We skip the library, thank God, and jump straight into 2 betrayals, flying around in a wide open area to shut down some things. We have the thematic low point, either returning to the Covenant ship to find the now infected keys, or in this game, failing to save Dr. Telson and the crew of the station. And finally, we have an assault on a spaceship involving a long canyon section and detonating a nuclear explosion. This isn't like an accident. The game is doing a Force Awakens 3 years before that movie actually came out. It's just instead of inheriting the same story structure, the game is instead borrowing the same level design structure. What I can't tell you is why. Tonally and story-wise, Halo 4 is aiming for a completely different vibe to Halo 1. It's a much more introspective and personal story. I don't know if this creative repetition is intended to be a reference or as a sign of uncreativity, or if it's like poetry and that it rhymes. To be perfectly honest, I can't even tell if it was intentional or they just thought that this is the structure that makes a good Halo game, but the specific mechanical and visual similarities between some of these missions makes me think that on some level it had to be intentional. Halo Combat Evolved isn't really about anything, and I don't mean that as a negative. Halo 1 is about shooting aliens in a strange, fantastical environment, but there aren't really any deeper themes you can dissect from the story. Halo 4 does have themes, a big one in particular, one that almost every story element in the game feeds back into: the difference between man and machine.
Before this is all over, promise me you'll figure out which one of us is the machine.
Master Chief is a human who acts like a machine. Cortana is a machine that acts more like a human. Prometheans, the game's new enemy faction, are quite literally a fusion of machine and man. The villain's main plot is to turn all of humanity into his digital robot soldiers. The game opens with Dr. Halsey being interrogated by a guy who asks if Master Chief's success was down to his lack of humanity, and Halsey talking about how Spartans aren't just military hardware but the next step in our evolution as a species. The fusion of man and machine in harmony in contrast to the discordant abominations of the Prometheans. Early in the game, it's revealed that Requiem is a prison. At its core is an ancient forerunner named the Didact, who Chief and Cortana are tricked into releasing because they don't identify that this big ominous orb defying the laws of physics might be a bad thing. I would simply not activate the big evil looking orb, but maybe I'm just built different. Anyway, the Didact is a strange villain. He speaks almost entirely in villainous monologues, and as I just mentioned, he wants to turn everyone into robot zombies. He's intended to be a dark reflection of Master Chief, where the Didact views machines as a tool and something to be dominated. Chief views his machine as a partner, romantic undertones absolutely intended. All of this stuff is threaded throughout the game, and I can pick up on it clearly. But I don't really know what I'm supposed to do with it. What am I supposed to draw from it, or if it even really works as a concept at all? The idea of Master Chief being more machine than man is only sort of true. If he was more like the Chief seen in the trilogy, I might believe it more. But the Chief seen in this game is very much human. He cares deeply for the people around him, especially Cortana. He's not like RoboCop, he's just a man who's a little bit emotionally stunted. Steve Downes, who voices Master Chief in all the games, is not a professional voice actor by trade, but I think he delivers his best performance in this game. I feel the emotions lingering behind that big helmeted face, but that's kind of to the detriment of the idea that Master Chief is a machine. I don't feel like that's true.
8 years.
AIs deteriorate after 7, Chief.
Halsey,
Chief.
we need to find Halsey.
Chief, please.
She made you. She can fix you.
I won't recover from rampancy, Chief.
If we can just get back to Earth and find Halsey, she can fix this.
He's also, Space Jesus, which is an entire separate layer which we can unpack later. And as well as all that, a Man Out of Time, Captain America, Greatest Generation analogy which feels really out of place on top of all of this. About halfway through the game, Chief and Cortana meet the new UNSC, a ship that gets dragged into Requiem like they did. The UNSC Infinity, an absolutely gargantuan ship around 10 times the size of any human ship previously seen in the series. This is meant to establish the post-war feeling of humanity, that we're no longer the underdogs but a dominant power in the galaxy with the size to prove it. The Infinity is also host to a new generation of Spartans, the Spartan 4s, not kidnapped children like the Master Chief, but enlisted soldiers who've volunteered to undergo procedures to become Spartans. This is where the 4-year timeskip starts to feel completely ridiculous. For humanity to have gone from about to be completely wiped out to having a massive, highly advanced starship and a new generation of Spartans in a mere 4 years feels completely implausible. It feels like there's a generational gap between Chief and the Spartan 4s. The one Spartan 4 you meet in the main campaign, Sarah Palmer, is clearly meant to represent a very different kind of soldier to the Chief, personable and a bit cocky.
I thought you'd be taller.
Coincidentally, she's the best character in the game because she's basically just Commander Shepard but a Spartan.
Ladies and other Spartans, listen up.
For the amount of changes that have happened, it really feels like at least 10 years have passed since the end of Halo 3. As to why the Covenant are back as an enemy, the game hilariously addresses this with a single line.
I thought we had a truce with the Covenant.
A lot can happen in 4 years.
That's seriously the only explanation that the game gives for why you're fighting the Covenant again, even though the Covenant was functionally destroyed by the end of Halo 3. The game's secret second campaign addresses this better, but the main campaign doesn't even bother and just hopes you'll accept that this is a Halo game and we need aliens for you to shoot at. There's even more too that makes the 4-year timeskip feel completely implausible, like Dr. Halsey, who looks about 30 years older than she did in Halo Reach, which was supposed to be only like 5 years ago, and just the attitudes that the crew of the Infinity have towards Master Chief. Like his deeds and his heroism have been lost to history and he's just some forgotten relic. Except it was only 4 years ago and all of the people in this room would have been grown adults when it happened, especially the guy saying it. Which brings us to probably the worst element of the whole game, Captain Del Rio. Del Rio is the captain of the Infinity, and his primary character trait is that he's a prick.
Captain, what's Force Recon's assessment of the terrain?
I know you've been off the field for a while, Master Chief, but this is a blow-through op. Sending in recon would just slow us down.
Yeah, what kind of idiot would send recon to scout a mission first? That's so outdated, you man who's probably younger than I am. Del Rio is, I think, supposed to represent that the new UNSC has grown arrogant in their power. He commands this massive ship full of Spartans and he feels like the Chief is outdated. The problem is that he's written to be comically angry, bitter, spiteful, and wrong. He's literally wrong in every single argument he takes part in. There's a particular moment where the Chief explains to him the severity of the crisis, and his response is to suggest that Master Chief hallucinated the whole thing. Which, if this game was set 10 years after Halo 3, I might believe. But at 4 years, Del Rio was absolutely a captain during the time of Halo 3 and knows that this guy saved the galaxy and you should probably trust the things he says. It feels like an incredibly forced conflict to have the captain of the Infinity be such a dick to you. We need a reason that Master Chief is on his own for the final battle, and the best they could do was making the captain of the flagship an asshole and an idiot who just refuses to help because he's a dick. It reaches a head when Cortana has a brief spark of anger because of her rampancy, and Del Rio orders her immediate termination right there on the spot, and then throws what I can only describe as a hissy fit when no one is willing to do it.
I am ordering you to surrender that AI!
No, sir.
Lieutenant! Arrest that man!
Captain!
Arrest him!
There's nothing wrong with a character being a bit of a jackass, but with Del Rio it gets to the point where I'm not sure how he functions in society without bursting a blood vessel every day because he seems to hate everyone around him so much. He's deliberately contrasted against his second in command, Lasky, who feels like he just walked out of a Star Trek show with how nice and cordial and friendly he is. It's immediately apparent that everything would be going so much smoother if Lasky was in charge, which is exactly what happens by the end of the game, and Del Rio is never seen or heard from again, although to be honest that's a bit of a through line for the 343 Halo era. I could forgive all of it if we just set the game further away from the originals. Del Rio's attitude makes so much more sense if you simply choose to believe that it's been longer. But then would contradict the 7 years rampancy rule, and I guess that was more important? AI rampancy is kind of a weird concept to base the central conflict of this game around in the first place. It is a big point of difference between AIs in the Halo universe and AIs in most forms of media. In most sci-fi stories, AI are essentially immortal unless they get shut down for whatever reason. It's actually a concept imported into the Halo universe from Marathon, but Marathon goes in directions with its rampant AIs. In this game, it's pretty much just presented as Cortana losing her marbles. There's something about this whole situation that I find kind of perversely manipulative. The game does a lot to make sure that the player feels sympathy for Cortana's situation, and it's easy enough to do that. Jen Taylor can sell the ranges of emotion that this character is going through as she loses her grip on reality. But there's just something uncomfortably gendered about the whole thing. I can't not point out Cortana's redesign. They lean even harder into making her look like a naked woman. Yes, part of that is the graphical fidelity, but she's clearly just a realistic looking naked woman now, with natural curves and boobs that sag in a realistic way as if she's actually naked. And she's not really see-through anymore, and the markings on her body have basically become lingerie. They're pretty much one step away from an R rating. You can even see by comparing her to Roland, the game's other AI, that she looks way more real and less see-through than he does. There is a clear design choice here to make Cortana look as real as possible. It's not really that she's supposed to look sexy. The game doesn't really sexualize her in a traditional look how hot she is bro kind of way. She's specifically supposed to look naked. It's a design choice intended to make Cortana look more vulnerable and small, with the intention, I guess, that a mostly male audience will feel more protective of her. It's playing on some very, very old tropes about strong men protecting vulnerable women, usually illustrated naked. At my most generous, it's a choice built on the man versus machine idea. Master Chief, the human, looks like a robot with his emotionless lack of face and big bulky armour. And Cortana, the robot, looks like the complete opposite, a naked human woman. In an Adam and Eve sort of way, you don't get any more human than nudity, right? Humanity in its purest form. If it was just that visual idea, then fine. But the game is primarily about how Cortana is dying and losing her capacity for rational thought, and we as Chief are supposed to feel sorry for her. I think that is the bigger and more interesting story hook here, and I certainly don't need her to be the most on-the-nose symbology for vulnerability in order to feel that way about it. And of course there's still a sexual component to it. Maybe in an ideal perfect world the image of a naked woman wouldn't be inherently sexual, but we don't live in a perfect world, especially not in 2012. Cortana is the love interest of the game. She is in love with John, and John is supposed to be you. Can we really pretend that having a naked woman love and care for and constantly compliment the male player's self-insert doesn't have kinky undertones? It's not a neutral exchange. If you flipped the gender roles and it was a bulked up armoured lady and a sexy naked man in her palm that was going dangerously insane, suddenly I think a lot of players would be really uncomfortable with that arrangement, even though the story is functionally identical. The connotations of a crazy naked man running rampant are a little bit different from a crazy naked lady. I talked about Cortana through this lens in Halo 3 as well, but where that game did a better job of balancing the problematic undertones of these kinds of gender dynamics. Halo 4 is so much heavier on the ways it leverages Cortana's gender to induce feelings of pity in the player. The way she talks, the way she looks, the little things she does when standing around. It's all drenched in this fragile woman coding, and ultimately, I just don't think it's necessary. I think it speaks to a lack of confidence in the story and the characters. I didn't need all of this in order to care about Cortana's condition. In case you were wondering, all of this is exactly why Halo 5 is a much better game, but we'll get there later. None of what I've talked about so far is even my biggest problem with the story of Halo 4, if you can believe it. No, my biggest problem is that Master Chief is Space Jesus. Let's talk about Space Jesus. So about halfway through the game, you run into a room and Master Chief is teleported to a magical, heaven-like place, where another Forerunner, the Librarian, explains to him that she seeded his creation millennia ago and that him arriving here on Requiem was destiny. He's a very special boy. And then she unlocks his full potential, making him immune to the Diadac's robo-zombie laser.
Reclaimer. When I indexed mankind for repopulation, I hid seeds from the Didact. Seeds which would lead to an eventuality. Your physical evolution. Your combat skin. Even your ancilla Cortana. You are the culmination of 1,000 lifetimes of planning.
Words simply cannot describe how much I hate this reveal. I don't even know if I have a proper logical reason for why this bothers me so much, but I'll try my best. I find the concept of destiny within stories to be bad and boring at the best of times. Destiny implies predestination. Whatever was stated to happen was going to happen. It robs any of the characters involved of the agency that led to those outcomes. There was never any doubt that Master Chief was going to win in the end because it was predetermined to be so by this lady who is, to all intents and purposes, God. She's the one who gave humanity life in this new era and seeded the eventuality of John 117, whatever that means. To me, it marks the first time that the series has moved completely from sci-fi into full sci-fantasy. It no longer feels within the realms of reality that she could have done this, so it must just be magic. Seriously, what within the realms of all that makes sense in this universe could she have done to make sure that a kid called John was born and a lady called Dr. Halsey kidnapped him and made him some fancy armor and a naked lady friend? The idea of it completely shatters my suspension of disbelief. If the Forerunners were capable of doing such a ludicrously advanced thing, how is it that the Flood, or the ancient race of humans, posed such a threat to them? And why? So he's immune to the digilaser? She could have just as easily given him that ability without it being genetically seeded into the human race millions of years ago. I know it's kind of ridiculous to complain about religious aspects of a game literally called Halo. I get that. Halo has always contained an element of religiosity in its subtext. I talked about the Dante's Inferno allegory in ODST, or Noah's Ark in Halo 3. But to me the difference is in the intention. Halo is a religiously loaded word, but within the games, the Halos are not divine. They're big super weapons, and the people that consider them to be divine are wrong, unable to grasp the bigger picture. If the Arbiter's story has a moral, it's that unquestioning faith and loyalty to a religion is dangerous. Here, I am being asked to put my faith in this lady, and there is no subversive angle to it. This also essentially paints the Diadact as the devil, the personification of sin, a fallen angel bent on revenge. The Diadact and the Librarian are both borrowed characters from the Terminals in Halo 3, a married couple from the end of the Forerunner War against the Floods. Though Halo 4 adds a lot of twists to the story told in those Terminals, like the detail that the Forerunners waged a war against ancient humans where we were the aggressors. Which is why the Didact hates humans so much, with the double twist that actually the humans didn't care about the Forerunners at all, they were trying to contain the Flood. I explained in that Halo 3 video that the Forerunners were originally intended to be ancient humans, but that at some point they decided to make them a separate species instead, which leads to some contradictory information in the trilogy. Like the lines in Halo 1 where Guilty Spark seems to assume that you know who he is, which in this game is now explained by the Space Jesus thing. I think depicting the Forerunners in such a direct way as the Terminals in this game do kind of robs them of a lot of their mystique. They're just a race of bickering, Voldemort-looking politicians. I might even believe the whole Space Jesus thing more if the game didn't go out of its way to paint the Forerunners as just people. Players tend to consider the Didact one of the series' best villains, but I couldn't disagree more. He is exceptionally generic as far as villains go, being that he's driven primarily by jealousy and revenge. The Forerunners believed in a philosophy called the Mantle of Responsibility, essentially that their race was ordained by the gods to be protectors and caretakers of the galaxy. The Librarian Anakin believes that the Forerunner's time has passed and that humans are the new holders of the mantle, and that makes the Didact very annoyed and jealous, assuming that we don't have what it takes. He also hates us because of that teensy-weensy accidental genociding we did 10 million years ago. Revenge is the most basic of villainous plots you can get. I don't think it even holds a candle to the eldritch existentialism of the all-consuming Gravemind. I think mostly people just like him because he has a cool look and a cool voice.
So fades the great harvest of my betrayal. Even these beasts recognize what you were oblivious to, human. Your nobility has blinded you, as ever.
I will concede that he has presence as a villain. He looks very threatening and imposing, but his motivations are very bare bones. The game draws a very deliberate parallel between the Didact and the Flood. His Prometheans are essentially the opposite of the Flood with the same result, loss of will and humanity. But instead of being consumed by a biological threat, it's a digital threat. I think focusing on the opposite of the Flood for a second Halo trilogy makes perfect sense, but it also leaves the Didact himself as more of a transitionary villain. He's still a biological threat driven by human, or humanoid at least, motivations. It's what his robot army does without him that will become truly a dark reflection of the Flood. The game is at its best when it isn't getting bogged down by all this ancient alien operatic drama, and it's focusing on the small emotional moments between its two characters. For all the problems I have with the way Cortana is used in this game, I can't deny that the best parts of the game come down to the quiet emotional moments between these two old friends. Widely considered the best mission in the game, and I agree, is the second last mission, where Chief and Cortana try, and fail, to save a research station from the Didact. By this point, Cortana's condition has gotten considerably worse, to the point where it's a struggle for her to accomplish even basic tasks, and it's a sad, emotional state of affairs.
Cortana, see if you can raise Tilson. Get me a status on the rest of the station.
I can't believe he did that.
Cortana, I need that info. Look, don't think about the Didact. Don't think about the Composer. Only focus on finding me Tilson.
Tilson. Sandra Kay. Female, 51 years of age. Doctor of Archaeology, Pegasi Institute. Got her! Biosignature stable on 350 level. B-deck.
Thank you, Cortana.
I think moments like this, where Master Chief, the big bulky soldier man player insert, is forced to be the emotional support, are really compelling. In fact, I think one of the strongest elements of Halo 4 is how it kind of takes the Master Chief away from the player and makes him his own person. That's even represented visually at the very end, at least if you're playing on Legendary. In an extremely controversial move, the game shows you his eyes at the very end. What they look like is irrelevant. The point is that they're his eyes, not yours. He's no longer a figure for players to view as an avatar, not like Noble Six was. He's a full character in his own right. The scenes with Dr. Tilson are also an emotional strong point of the game. Tilson is a very regular sort of lady, and then comes Chief telling her that she has to blow up the station, her life's work, to stop some ancient weirdo. And even though she's only in this one mission, you can feel the emotions at work.
Maybe next time you rescue us, you can give us more time to pack?
Next time.
I really feel for this woman, and I feel sad when she gets vaporized 10 minutes from now. I wish that the depth and nuance that the game can achieve in these smaller emotional moments was on display in the wider plot of the game, because unfortunately, the final confrontation with the Didact is a huge letdown. After boarding his ship with a nuke and fighting your way to the centre, you end up confronting him on a bridge, and after taunting you with some more villainous monologuing, Cortana uses her fragmenting personality to hold him down, while in a quick-time event you wordlessly shove a grenade into his chest and send him tumbling into the abyss like Palpatine. that is the last we see of the Didact. If you're only playing the games, you might assume that he's dead now, which isn't actually true. He comes back later in a run of comics, but as far as the games are concerned, he dies here in one of only 2 QuickTime events in the entire game. It's such an anticlimax. Arguably, the real climax of the game is the final conversation with Cortana, where she presents herself at human size and they have one last conversation face to face, or face to Pfizer anyway. But come on, the main bad guy of the game and you're just gonna wordlessly chuck him into the void? I also feel like the game has no real resolution to the man versus machine theme. Chief and Cortana, man and machine, work together to kill the Didact, and that's good. But they've been working together the entire game. Them working together to kill the final boss isn't really a big climactic resolution to that theme. It's just a continuation of what they've been doing since Halo 1. Maybe what the game is saying is that without Cortana doing the human part for him, Master Chief will now need to learn to grow and change and find that balance between man and machine and himself. And with his final line, I can see what they were going for.
Our duty as soldiers is to protect humanity, whatever the cost.
They say that, like, soldiers and humanity are 2 different things. I mean, soldiers aren't machines. We're just people. I'll let you have the deck to yourself.
She said that to me once. About being a machine.
I think contained within itself, this scene really works. I genuinely think it's great. But within the wider context of the game, Master Chief has displayed humanity the entire time. I've never felt that he's a machine. He needs to learn to be a little bit more emotionally open. But a machine? That feels like a stretch to me. Even with all of my problems and criticisms, I can honestly say that I don't think Halo 4's story is bad. It's more complicated than that. It's a game of massive peaks and valleys. I think that 343 were really trying to make something with this game, something way more complicated than the broader operatic storytelling of the Bungie-era games. I think you can see that with just how many words I've spent on it compared to the previous games. I think there's a fantastic story hidden somewhere in Halo 4, but the game would need to decide which of the many stories it's trying to tell actually matters. Of course, arguably the most important story of Halo 4 doesn't have anything to do with narrative at all, because the plot is not why Halo 4 is such a divisive title in the franchise. You may have noticed the distinct lack of Call of Duty comparisons in the video, which is weird because this game is often disparaged as the Call of Duty Halo, and that is down entirely to the drastic changes that Halo 4 makes to the multiplayer. The most important, drastic, and controversial change is that Halo 4 uses a loadout system, the only game in the franchise before or after to do so. This is a way more fundamental change than you might think just by looking at it, because this single change pretty much changes the entire feel of Halo 4. Since you pick your weapons before the match begins and have a wide variety of perks to choose from, a regular match of Halo 4 is no longer perfectly balanced with all players starting on the same footing. Suddenly, particular builds matter a whole lot more than knowing maps and spawns. It's no longer a race to find the weapons you want, as along with this change a concept called Ordnance was added, where after a certain number of kills you can call in a random power weapon or power up. There are even wider effects than that though. Think about it this way. Since the player can choose from any of these 7 guns at the start of a match, each of these 7 guns has to be roughly equivalent. They may look, sound and feel different, but if you were to compare these guns on a spreadsheet, they're all pretty much the same. They're all balanced so that they all have a similar TTK, or time to kill, which essentially means that from the time you start shooting, how long does it take to kill the other guy? This can be affected by range and the like, but in the broad strokes, all of these guns are balanced to have a similar TTK to make sure that none of them are bad choices. Which of course also means that none of them are good choices. This is how guns have always been balanced in Call of Duty. Your choice between these machine guns is more an exercise in personal expression or whatever specific patterns you feel most comfortable with, rather than any kind of tactical advantage. They're all the same fundamental gun, with modifiers added to make them unique. Halo traditionally does not work like this. There is one gun for each role. Even when there are 2 similar guns like the battle rifle and the carbine, they are balanced completely differently for different situations. In Halo 4, the battle rifle rifle, DMR, carbine, and light rifle are all pretty much the same gun, and then the assault rifle, storm rifle, and suppressor are also all basically the same gun. People might be really mad at me for saying that, but if you look at them on a spreadsheet, it's true. And you can even feel that at work in the campaign. When you go to a Covenant, Human, or Promethean weapon rack, it's the same types of weapons that serve the same functions with a different coat of paint on them. The game is still an FPS, but this change essentially changes the genre of FPS that it is. And if I know one thing about gamers, it's that they love change. There's also the addition of kill cams, which I promise were in the original release, but either they've been removed from MCC or the playlists they're included in are very low in the rotation. And in the original release, the game had a prestige rank system, very reminiscent of the way Call of Duty handles its ranking system. All of this to say, the game was clearly trying to be more like Call of Duty. So, do all of these changes make Halo 4 a bad game? Absolutely not. They make it a different game, that's definitely true, but they didn't half-ass this change. I think on its own, separate from any kind of franchise expectations, Halo 4 is a pretty solid multiplayer shooter that blends the Halo and Call of Duty styles of gameplay quite well. I mean, I still think the game looks terrible, and I've never in my entire life been able to settle on a multiplayer customization set that I'm happy with, but to play it, the game is pretty solid. The game is still balanced around rechargeable shields and vehicle combat, something which you don't find in Call of Duty, so it's not fair to say that Halo 4 is just a knockoff of Call of Duty. Rather, it's borrowing and adapting some of the most popular features of the time, and personally, I've always thought it worked. Halo 4 is a fun game to play online. I think part of the reason I'm okay with it though is that I know it's not a permanent change. I know that Halo 5 drops the entire thing and goes back to a more traditional Halo experience. It makes Halo 4 in retrospect feel very experimental. These changes aren't something they're married to, but it's something that they want to try, see how it feels, see how people react. People reacted badly. The thing about that is, though, multiplayer modes inevitably age worse than campaigns, primarily because at a certain point it becomes almost impossible to play them. I can't play Halo 4 multiplayer in its original form at all because the servers were shut down 2 years ago. I can play the campaign in its original state if I really wanted to. I have the disc right here. It's just more convenient to play it through the Master Chief Collection and it looks nicer for the video. But that means the changes that Halo 4 made to multiplayer and just how controversial they were is a fact likely to be lost to time. Such is the ever-present fluid nature of video games. And that fact also leaves Halo 4's most surprising and impressive feature completely robbed of the very things that made it so impressive in the first place.
There she is, man. Infinity.
Halo 4 actually contains an entire second campaign. In fact, if you're playing through the entire thing, it comes out to at least double the length of the main campaign. This is Spartan Ops, an episodic story released after Halo 4's launch in weekly installments. Spartan Ops seems absolutely destined to be one of the most obscure campaign experiences in the entire franchise. It's not even listed in the campaign section of the Master Chief Collection, it's hidden within the firefight menu, bundling it with the horde modes of ODST and Reach in a way that's honestly not fair. Spartan Ops is somewhere in the middle between a full campaign and a horde mode. It's almost like a sort of horde mode with a plot attached to it. Each episode is broken up into 5 chapters, and each chapter takes place in a small map where you fight a lot of enemies and complete some relatively simple objectives. Some of these maps are adapted from the campaign, some of these maps are just straight multiplayer maps, and a few of them are unique locations made just for Spartan Ops. But all of them are used at least 2 or 3 times across the 10 episodes of Spartan Ops. The premise of Spartan Ops is that it's been 6 months since the events of the base game, and the Infinity has come back to Requiem to study and explore. With teams of Spartans sent out across the planet, you play as one of these Spartan teams, Fireteam Crimson, using your multiplayer Spartan customization. As for in this game, the multiplayer is actually contextualized within the story as War Games, a holographic training program for the Spartans on board the Infinity. The missions are not really designed to be played alone. Characters will always refer to Crimson as a team of Spartans, and a lot of the encounters are very much balanced for multiple players. However, unlike in the main campaign, dying doesn't reset your progress to the last checkpoint, so you can just respawn when you die, which does make them playable in single player. Each episode also shipped with a glossy CGI cutscene which advanced the plot of the story in a more direct way than the missions themselves. They're quite long too, around 3 or 4 minutes apiece, which for animation of this quality is pretty impressive. But the most impressive detail of all is that Spartan Ops was free. I mean, you had to buy Halo 4, of course, but Spartan Ops was bundled with the game at no additional cost. It's pretty much exactly the framework for what we would now call a live service element, long before that term was in popular use. And if I'm being completely honest, I like it a lot more than I do the base campaign. Spartan Ops feels like the game that I wish they'd had the confidence to make in the first place, one unbound from previous legacy characters. Pretty much the entire cast, with one major exception, are new to Halo 4. Lasky and Palmer take on starring roles along with the ship AI Roland and a new fire team of Spartans called Majestic. Spartan Ops also takes the time to actually flesh out and give motivation to the faction of Covenant that you fought in the base campaign. They're led by an elite extremist called Jul Mdama, a shrewd sort who uses religious zealotry as a front to gain more power. He's here on Requiem looking not for divinity, but for ancient Forerunner technology he can use to make himself more powerful. The Covenant don't speak English in Halo 4, much like Reach in Halo 1, which can make some of these scenes flow a bit awkward. But a bit of motivation for these new Covenant does a lot for them as villains. And looking back, you can see that scrappier, more aggressive view at work in their design. These new Covenant are much less armoured and much less colourful. Majestic, for their part, do a strong job of illustrating the difference between this new breed of Spartans and the old breed. Being that unlike Chief, these Spartans are just people. They banter, they bicker, they look out for each other in a more classic soldier bravado kind of way. And oh my god, is that Spock?
Dr. Halsey? Spartan Thorn, I'll be your escort for the day.
Oh my god, it is Spock! I can't believe I never noticed that before. Sorry, that's not relevant to what I was saying at all. It's weird then that despite being framed as the main characters of Spartan Ops, Majestic are not the team you play as in the missions. Instead, Crimson is a totally silent group who don't even really serve as protagonists of Spartan Ops despite being the player characters. Instead, it's better to think of Fireteam Crimson as nameless extras within the story. Your missions are tangentially related to the things happening in the plot, but rarely have a major impact. For example, in episode 1 you find a strange Forerunner artifact that happens to be critically important for the rest of the plot, but Crimson never interacts with it again. It's just mentioned in the cutscene that, hey, yeah, those Crimson guys found it out in the field. The character who gets the most development during the missions themselves is actually your handler, Spartan Miller. His job is to give you all your objectives and handle the logistics, like getting your ride home. This despite being a Spartan himself and seemingly sitting at his desk in full power armour. I mean, that seems like a waste of resources to me, but what do I know? He starts as kind of a nervous office clerk guy who's not sure of himself, with Palmer often taking charge of the missions, but by the end he's earned his confidence as a guy in the chair ready to yell at other departments on your behalf.
Fire Team Shadow, this is Spartan Miller and Ops. I'm filling in for Commander Palmer, so apologies to your team's handler, Spartan Carmichael, for going over his head here.
This is Shadow Leader. Go ahead, Miller.
Got a job for you. Infiltrate a Covenant cruiser and destroy her power core. I'm sending you coordinates now.
There is a lot of functional mission dialogue like that across these 10 episodes, and let me tell you, by the end I feel like I know Jared Miller better than any other character in the entire series. But there's a kind of low-stakes charm to the storytelling of the Spartan Ops missions. The missions you're doing, with only a couple of exceptions like the last episode, are very inconsequential. You're not saving the galaxy, you're just clearing out an area of bad guys so some scientists can come in and study it. And then you're clearing out the same area again, with those scientists getting attacked by a new set of bad guys. The level reuse can become kind of tedious, but it has a sort of realistic touch to it. Like, these areas are your squad's assigned zone, so of course you're going to be coming back here a lot. When the Infinity is boarded in episode 7 and all of the Spartan squads are called back to defend the ship, 4 of the 5 chapters take place on a single map, but it feels fine because this is your section of the ship. There are other Spartan teams protecting the other sections. This hangar bay, server room and engine room, this is your part of a much larger ship-wide operation. In a main Halo campaign, would you ever spend hours bonding with a good old southern boy of a pilot named Murphy after you rescue him from captivity? Or really get into the nitty-gritty details of the job of the Spartan who runs logistics? Or just have the ship AI constantly annoy your mission handler by making jokes?
Hello, Crimson. Roland here. How you been? Well, enough chit-chat. There's a UNSC base under attack, and they need your help. This really is your whole life, isn't it?
Roland, get off the line.
Maybe that sounds really boring to you, but what all this dialogue is really here for is just some flavour in the background while you shoot hordes of aliens. The shooting guys is fun, and the dialogue is easy breezy, and it all makes for a perfectly pleasant, low-stakes gaming experience. The cutscenes do have stakes, and they advance like a sort of super high-budget HBO show with absolutely zero downtime, with lots of twists and betrayals and the like. To study the artifact they brought on board, Lasky calls in Dr. Halsey, and her use in this game is so much more interesting than her appearance in Halo Reach. In the time since the end of the war, her actions have caught up with her. She's no longer a hero, but a war criminal who kidnapped children and did cruel, bizarre experiments on them. People now treat her like she's a supervillain, except for Lasky himself, who continues his trend of being a Star Trek character by being extremely cordial with her despite the circumstances. Spartan Thorn, aka Spock, treats her with more curiosity, trying to dig into why she made the decisions she did, while Sarah Palmer openly despises her. Halsey is characterised as having a dangerous hunger for knowledge, even being willing to work with the Covenant in order to get it. It's one of my favourite depictions of a genius character like this. You can assume that she's smart enough to solve basically any scientific problem, but she's also exceptionally arrogant and self-confident, unable to consider that betraying the UNSC might lead them to trying to kill you.
Didact's hand. If people would just share things with me, I could solve all the world's problems.
Most importantly, she doesn't view what she did with the Spartans as wrong at all. She will and does defend herself every single time it's brought up. It's even clear that she loves her Spartans in a strange, warped, maternalistic sort of way. By focusing on these personal character stories, more than the ancient aliens and super weapons, Spartan Ops delivers a much tighter and much more compelling narrative than the main campaign does. There's a lot of interesting character dynamics running through the show, like the one-sided rivalry between Thorn and his commander DeMarco, or the personal friendship between Lasky and Palmer showcased throughout by the fact that the two of them are on a first-name basis.
I'm serious. We shouldn't have to execute a civilian.
No, but it has to be done. And I don't trust anyone else to do it right.
There has to be another way. I mean...
I know what you mean, Tom. And I won't see you court-martialed over that woman.
Sarah, stand down!
Orders are orders, Tom. This isn't my first rodeo.
I don't suppose it is.
We do get to the ancient superweapons eventually when the librarian gives Halsey something called the Janus Key, which functions as a map of every piece of Forerunner technology in the galaxy, the thing that the Covenant are really after. But that's just the driving force, when the real gist of the story is that Sarah Palmer has been sent to kill Halsey, but Fireteam Majestic have been sent to save her. Tune in next week to find out what happens. The season ends with Requiem being hurled into the sun and the Infinity just escaping at the last minute thanks to Crimson and Majestic. Halsey is still with the Covenant looking for revenge since Sarah Palmer cost her an arm, and both sides only have one half of the Janus Key. It's the perfect season finale for a show that never actually got a second season. The story was continued in a comic book, but Halo has never really attempted something like Spartan Ops again, which I have to assume means that despite my personal love for it, it wasn't very successful. I think in Spartan Ops, though, we can see the beginnings of what would become Halo 5. Halo 5, with its massive cast of characters, feels more like a sequel to Spartan Ops than it does to Halo 4. And I think that shows a level of confidence in the storytelling they accomplished with this strange bit of side story. A level of confidence that I so wish they could have maintained. But that's a story for another day.
LT! Get us the hell out of here!
Aye, sir.
Ends with a message. Every great journey begins with a single step. This is our beginning. I feel kinda bad being so harsh on the game when they ended with a message like that. This was their first try. Literally. Individually, most of them had worked on games before, but as a group, this is their first game together. And as a debut game, yeah, it's got a lot of flaws, but it's really clear that they tried to make something with this game. They really did. It's why, despite all of my problems, I can't call Halo 4 a bad game. I don't think that's true. But I do think it's a game that's lost, that never quite figured out what it wanted to be. It has parts that I love, and parts that I hate, but neither really dominate my thoughts on the game. I've spent longer on Halo 4 than any other game in the series so far, and I think that speaks to both the strengths and weaknesses of the game. There is so much to talk about with Halo 4. In replaying Halo 4, I find myself rooting for 343, rooting for them to find their identity and find their own unique way of making Halo games. Even if I don't like some of their choices, I want them to make those choices, and I want to see the game that they could create when they're not bound by the expectations of the franchise. And considering what happened next, I get the feeling I might be the only person who wanted that, but that's a story for another day.
Humanity stands as the greatest threat in the galaxy. Refusing to eradicate them is a fool's gambit. We squander eons in the darkness, while they seize our triumphs for their own. The mantle of responsibility for all things belongs to Forerunners alone. Think of my acts as you will, but do not doubt the reality. The reclamation has already begun, and we are hopeless to stop it.
Thank you for watching, and a very special thank you to my wonderful patrons for your continued support. If you'd like to see your name up here, or just support the things that I do, then please consider signing up. It would mean a lot to me. As well as a like, a comment, a share, and a subscribe for the algorithmic nonsense or whatever. To see the previous entries in this series, you can find the entire playlist up here, or for something different, why not listen to me and my friend Nathan go through every movie in the DCEU in our podcast Enter the Snyderverse. We just got to The Suicide Squad, and it was actually good, so that was a nice change of pace.